What if everything we think we know about Earth's history is completely wrong? What if our planet has been through this cycle before, not just once, but countless times? What if civilizations have risen, flourished, and been completely erased from existence, only for the whole process to start over again from scratch? Stay with me on this journey, because what I'm about to show you will completely change how you see our world and our place in it. We like to think of human civilization as the pinnacle of Earth's development. We imagine ourselves as the first intelligent species to ever walk this planet, the first to build cities, create technology, and reach for the stars. But what if that's just an illusion created by our incredibly short perspective on time? Earth is 4.5 billion years old. That number is so vast that our minds can barely comprehend it. If you compressed all of Earth's history into a single year, humans would appear in the final minutes of December 31st. Everything we call recorded history would fit into the last few seconds. The pyramids, the Roman Empire, the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, the Internet age, all of it would happen in less time than it takes to blink your eyes. But here's what's truly unsettling. In those billions of years before humans appeared, Earth wasn't sitting idle. It was active, dynamic, constantly changing. Continents drifted across the globe like massive puzzle pieces. Oceans formed and disappeared. Mountain ranges rose from flat plains and then eroded back into dust. And through all of this geological chaos, life persisted, evolved, and adapted in ways we're only beginning to understand. The fossil record tells us about some of these ancient life forms. We know about the dinosaurs that ruled for over 160 million years. We've discovered evidence of complex ecosystems that existed hundreds of millions of years before the first dinosaur ever hatched. But here's the thing about fossils. They represent less than 1% of all the life that has ever existed on our planet. The rest simply vanished without a trace, consumed by time and the relentless recycling of Earth's surface. This brings us to a disturbing possibility. What if some of those vanished life forms weren't just simple organisms? What if intelligence has emerged on Earth before, perhaps multiple times, only to be completely erased by geological processes we can barely imagine? What if our planet has experienced complete resets that wiped the slate clean and forced evolution to start over from the beginning? Now, before you dismiss this as science fiction, consider what we know about mass extinctions. Earth has experienced at least 5 major extinction events that we can identify from the fossil record. The most famous is the asteroid impact that ended the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. But there were others that were even more devastating. The Permian extinction, which occurred around 250 million years ago, wiped out over 90% of all marine species and 70% of land species. It was so complete that scientists call it the Great Dying. But what if these weren't just random catastrophes? What if they were part of a pattern, a cycle that our planet goes through regularly? What if Earth has natural mechanisms that periodically reset the biological clock, clearing away whatever has evolved and making room for something new to take its place? Think about it from a different perspective. We know that Earth's magnetic field periodically reverses itself. The north magnetic pole becomes the south magnetic pole and vice versa. During these reversals, which happen roughly every few 100,000 years, our planet's protective magnetic shield weakens dramatically. This exposes the surface to dangerous cosmic radiation that can cause widespread mutations in living organisms and potentially trigger mass extinctions. We also know that our solar system passes through different regions of the galaxy as it orbits around the galactic center. Some of these regions are more dangerous than others, filled with higher levels of radiation or debris that could impact Earth. Our entire solar system completes one orbit around the galaxy, roughly every 230 million years. Is it a coincidence that this time frame roughly matches the intervals between some of Earth's major extinction events? But the resets might not always come from space. Earth itself has powerful mechanisms for wiping the slate clean. Supervolcanic eruptions can plunge the planet into years of volcanic winter, blocking out the sun and causing global temperatures to plummet. The Siberian Traps eruption, which may have caused the Permian extinction, covered an area larger than Europe with lava and pumped enormous amounts of toxic gases into the atmosphere. Even more dramatically, Earth's crust itself is constantly being recycled through the process of plate tectonics. The ocean floor, which covers more than 70% of our planet's surface, gets completely replaced roughly every 200 million years. Entire continents drift across the globe, crash into each other, and get pushed down into Earth's molten interior, where they melt and are reformed into new rock. This means that most of the evidence of Earth's deep past has been literally consumed by the planet itself. If a civilization had existed 300 million years ago, the land it was built on might now be buried miles beneath the ocean or melted down in Earth's mantle. Their cities, their technology, their very existence would be erased, as completely as if it had never happened. And this is where the story gets truly fascinating. Because if Earth has been reset multiple times, and if intelligent life has emerged before, then we might not be the first. We might not even be the second or third. We could be the latest in a long line of civilizations that have risen and fallen on this planet, each one believing they were the first, each one eventually succumbing to the same cosmic and geological forces that are still operating today. The evidence for this possibility is subtle but intriguing. There are layers in Earth's geological record that show sudden, dramatic changes in atmospheric chemistry. Spikes in carbon dioxide levels that happened far too quickly to be explained by known natural processes. Unusual concentrations of rare metals in rock layers that don't match any known volcanic or impact events. Strange isotope ratios that suggest the atmosphere was once very different from what it is today. Most scientists explain these anomalies through natural processes we don't fully understand yet. And they're probably right in most cases. But what if some of these chemical signatures are actually the remnants of ancient industrial activity? What if they're the fading echoes of civilizations that burned fossil fuels, processed metals, and altered their environment just like we're doing today? The idea seems impossible at first. Surely we would have found some physical evidence by now. Buildings, tools, machinery, something that would prove an ancient civilization existed. But remember, we're talking about timescales that are almost beyond human comprehension. 1 million years is enough time for even the most durable materials to completely break down. Steel rusts away, concrete crumbles, plastic decomposes under ultraviolet light. Even if an ancient civilization had built structures that seemed permanent to them, those structures would be dust by now. And that's assuming they built with materials we would recognize. What if an earlier civilization took a completely different technological path? What if they used organic materials that were designed to biodegrade? What if their tools were biological rather than mechanical? What if they achieved advanced technology through methods we haven't even imagined yet? We tend to assume that any intelligent species would develop technology the same way we did. Fire, metallurgy, steam power, electricity, computers. But that's just one possible path among countless others. Evolution is incredibly creative, and given enough time, it might find ways to achieve the same goals through completely different means. Consider how some animals today use tools and display intelligence in ways that often surprise us. Octopuses can solve complex puzzles, use tools, and even display what appears to be planning behavior. Dolphins have complex social structures and communication systems. Some birds can count, use tools, and pass knowledge to their offspring. These are all examples of intelligence that developed independently from our own evolutionary line. Now imagine giving these kinds of intelligent species not thousands or millions of years to develop, but hundreds of millions of years. Imagine the kind of sophisticated behaviors and technologies they might develop given that much time. And then imagine all of it being wiped away by a supervolcanic eruption or asteroid impact, leaving behind only the faintest chemical traces in rock layers that we might not even recognize as artificial. This brings us to one of the most unsettling aspects of the reset hypothesis. If it's true, then our own civilization might be living on borrowed time. The same forces that reset Earth in the past are still operating today. Supervolcanoes still exist. Asteroids still cross Earth's orbit. Our magnetic field is already showing signs of instability that could indicate an upcoming reversal. Climate change is altering our atmosphere in ways that could trigger runaway effects we don't fully understand. And unlike previous civilizations that might have faced these challenges, we have the unique disadvantage of being completely dependent on technology that could be wiped out by electromagnetic pulses from solar storms or magnetic field reversals. Our entire information infrastructure could be destroyed in a matter of hours, leaving future archaeologists with no record of our achievements except for the same kind of subtle chemical signatures that we're now finding in ancient rock layers. But perhaps the most chilling possibility is that this reset cycle isn't random at all. What if there's something built into Earth's natural systems that periodically clears the biological slate? What if our planet has evolved its own immune system that activates whenever life becomes too complex or too dominant? Think about it from Earth's perspective. Every time life evolves to a certain level of sophistication, it starts to dramatically alter the planet's natural systems. Advanced civilizations consume resources, change atmospheric composition, and potentially destabilize the delicate balance that keeps Earth habitable. From a planetary standpoint, this kind of interference could be seen as a threat that needs to be eliminated. We're already seeing hints of this in our own time. Human activity is changing Earth's climate faster than it has changed in millions of years. We're triggering what many scientists believe could be the sixth major extinction event in Earth's history. Ocean chemistry is shifting, ice caps are melting, and weather patterns are becoming increasingly unpredictable. It's as if the planet itself is responding to our presence with increasingly dramatic corrections. But what if this has all happened before? What if previous civilizations reached similar tipping points and triggered the same kind of planetary response? The geological record shows that Earth has experienced sudden, dramatic shifts in climate and atmospheric composition throughout its history. Most of these are attributed to natural causes like volcanic activity or asteroid impacts. But what if some of them were actually the planet's way of hitting the reset button on civilizations that had grown too disruptive? This possibility becomes even more intriguing when you consider the concept of planetary consciousness that some scientists have begun to explore. The Gaia hypothesis suggests that Earth functions as a single, self-regulating organism, where all living things work together to maintain conditions suitable for life. If this is true, then the planet might have developed mechanisms for dealing with species that threaten the overall stability of the system. We see similar patterns in smaller ecosystems all the time. When one species becomes too dominant and starts consuming resources faster than they can be replenished, natural forces usually step in to restore balance. Predator populations increase, diseases spread, or environmental conditions change in ways that bring the dominant species back under control. What if Earth has similar mechanisms operating on a planetary scale? The evidence for this kind of planetary self-regulation is subtle but compelling. Earth's temperature has remained relatively stable for billions of years, despite dramatic changes in solar output and atmospheric composition. The planet's oxygen levels have stayed within a narrow range that allows complex life to exist, even though the processes that produce and consume oxygen are constantly changing. Ocean salinity has remained remarkably constant, despite millions of years of rivers carrying salt into the sea. These kinds of long-term stability patterns suggest that Earth has powerful feedback mechanisms that keep conditions suitable for life. But what if these same mechanisms sometimes require drastic action? What if maintaining planetary stability occasionally demands the elimination of species that have become too disruptive? If this is true, then the resets we're talking about might not be random catastrophes at all. They might be Earth's equivalent of a controlled burn in a forest, clearing away overgrowth to make room for new life to flourish. From this perspective, mass extinctions aren't disasters, but necessary corrections that allow evolution to explore new possibilities. This brings us to an even more disturbing question. If Earth has reset itself multiple times, and if each reset has allowed new forms of intelligence to evolve, then what happens to the accumulated knowledge and wisdom of the civilizations that get wiped out? Is it lost forever, or does some trace of it survive to influence the next cycle? There are hints in our own development that suggest we might be unconsciously following patterns established by previous civilizations. The speed with which human technology has advanced seems almost impossibly rapid when you consider that we went from horse-drawn carriages to space travel in less than 2 centuries. It's as if we had some kind of hidden roadmap guiding our progress. Some researchers have suggested that this acceleration might be due to what they call morphic resonance, a hypothetical process where patterns from the past somehow influence present development. If this is real, then each civilization might be unconsciously building on the achievements of those that came before, even though no direct knowledge transfer occurred. We see similar patterns in biology, where evolution sometimes seems to find the same solutions independently in different lineages. Eyes, for example, have evolved separately dozens of times in different species. Flight has been independently invented by insects, birds, bats, and other creatures. It's as if there are certain optimal solutions that evolution keeps discovering over and over again. What if technological development follows similar patterns? What if there are certain logical progressions that any intelligent species will eventually follow, regardless of their starting point? Fire leads to metallurgy, which leads to more complex tools, which eventually leads to industrial processes and electronic devices. Each civilization might be independently rediscovering the same basic principles and following the same general path toward technological advancement. But here's where it gets really interesting. If this is true, then we might actually be able to predict what happened to previous civilizations by looking at our own current trajectory. We're already facing challenges that seem to be built into the development of any advanced technological society. Resource depletion, environmental degradation, the potential for creating weapons that could destroy civilization itself. These might not be unique problems that only we face. They might be universal challenges that every intelligent species encounters when it reaches a certain level of technological sophistication. And if Earth has been reset multiple times, it might be because previous civilizations failed to solve these same problems. This possibility is both terrifying and hopeful. Terrifying because it suggests we might be heading toward the same fate that befell our predecessors. But hopeful because it means we might still have time to find solutions that previous civilizations missed. We might be the first to break the cycle. The key might lie in understanding that we're not separate from Earth's natural systems, but part of them. Instead of trying to dominate and control the planet, we might need to learn to work with its natural processes. Instead of consuming resources as quickly as possible, we might need to develop technologies that operate more like biological systems, recycling materials and energy in closed loops that don't produce waste. Some of our most promising current technologies already seem to be moving in this direction. Solar panels harness energy the same way plants do. Wind turbines copy principles that evolution discovered millions of years ago. Biotechnology is learning to use living organisms as manufacturing systems. It's as if we're finally starting to understand that the most sustainable technologies are those that mimic nature rather than trying to replace it. But we're running out of time to implement these solutions. The signs of planetary stress are becoming increasingly obvious. Climate change is accelerating, biodiversity is declining at unprecedented rates, and our consumption of resources is approaching levels that the planet simply cannot sustain. If the reset hypothesis is correct, we might be approaching the same critical threshold that triggered planetary corrections in the past. The question is whether we can recognize the warning signs and change course before it's too late. Previous civilizations might have faced the same choice and failed to make the necessary changes. They might have been too invested in their existing systems, too confident in their ability to solve problems through technological innovation, or simply too divided to coordinate a planetary response. We have advantages that previous civilizations might not have had. We understand more about Earth's systems and our impact on them. We have global communication networks that allow us to coordinate responses on a planetary scale. We have developed technologies that could potentially allow us to live sustainably within Earth's natural limits. But we also face unique challenges. Our civilization is more complex and interconnected than any that has existed before. A collapse could happen faster and be more complete than anything previous civilizations experienced. We've created weapons that could destroy not just our own species, but much of the life on Earth. We've altered the planet's natural systems so dramatically that we might have already triggered irreversible changes. The clock is ticking, and the choice is ours. We can continue on our current path and risk becoming another forgotten civilization buried in Earth's geological layers. Or we can learn from the mistakes of our predecessors and find a way to break the cycle of reset and renewal that has shaped our planet's history. The evidence suggests that this choice has been made before, multiple times, by species we will never know existed. Each time, the result was the same. The civilization vanished, Earth reset itself, and evolution began the long process of creating new forms of life and intelligence. But maybe this time can be different. Maybe we can be the first civilization to recognize the pattern of intelligence and choose a different ending. Maybe we can learn to live as partners with our planet rather than its conquerors, ensuring that the story on Earth continues rather than starting over once again from the beginning. The signs are all around us if we know how to look for them. Hidden in plain sight, scattered across our planet like breadcrumbs, leading to a truth we've barely begun to comprehend. Ancient structures that defy our understanding of primitive civilizations. Precision-cut stones weighing hundreds of tons, fitted together so perfectly that you can't slide a piece of paper between them. Massive megalithic complexes that align perfectly with celestial bodies, demonstrating knowledge of astronomy that supposedly didn't exist when they were built. We've been conditioned to explain these anomalies away with comfortable stories about primitive peoples, somehow achieving impossible feats through sheer determination and simple tools. But what if these aren't the achievements of our ancestors at all? What if they're the remnants of something much older, the last surviving traces of civilizations that existed long before the supposed dawn of human history? Consider the precision of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Built with mathematical constants that weren't officially discovered until thousands of years later. Aligned with magnetic north to a degree of accuracy that modern construction techniques struggle to match. Constructed using limestone blocks that were somehow transported from quarries hundreds of miles away. The logistics alone would challenge modern engineering capabilities, yet we're told it was accomplished by people using copper tools and wooden ramps. But the pyramid is just one example among thousands. Across every continent, we find similar structures that shouldn't exist according to our timeline of human development. Massive stone circles in Turkey that predate Stonehenge by thousands of years. Underwater ruins off the coasts of Japan and India that must have been built when sea levels were much lower. Carved stone blocks in Peru that show evidence of being melted and reformed, as if exposed to temperatures that should have been impossible to achieve. Each of these anomalies is typically explained away individually. Natural geological processes, primitive techniques we don't fully understand, coincidental alignments that seem more significant than they really are. But taken together, they paint a picture of capabilities that don't fit our model of gradual human development. What if these aren't human achievements at all? What if they're the surviving fragments of pre-reset civilizations, the few structures that were built so solidly and in such geologically stable locations that they managed to survive the planetary clearing cycles? If Earth has been reset multiple times, then the most ancient of these structures might not be thousands of years old, but hundreds of thousands, or even millions of years old. This possibility becomes even more intriguing when we consider the materials used in these ancient constructions. Many of the most mysterious structures are built from stone that appears to have been somehow softened or melted during construction. The famous walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru show evidence of stones that were shaped while in a plastic state, then hardened into their final form. This suggests construction techniques that we don't possess today, methods that might have been developed by civilizations with completely different technological approaches. But the evidence goes beyond just physical structures. Embedded in human culture itself are memories that seem far older than they should be. Creation myths from around the world describe advanced beings who possessed knowledge and capabilities far beyond what early humans should have had. These stories speak of teachers who came from the sky or emerged from underground, bringing gifts of agriculture, mathematics, and astronomy. Traditional histories often describe golden ages when knowledge was more advanced than it is today, followed by great catastrophes that destroyed civilization and forced humanity to start over from primitive conditions. These narratives appear in cultures that had no contact with each other, separated by vast oceans and thousands of years. Yet they share remarkably similar themes about cycles of creation and destruction, rise and fall, advancement, and regression. The Hindu concept of yugas describes vast cycles of time where human civilization rises to great heights, then gradually declines until it's destroyed, and the cycle begins anew. The Maya spoke of multiple worlds that had been created and destroyed before our current one. Norse mythology describes Ragnarok, a great catastrophe followed by the rebirth of the world. Even in the Bible, we find references to Nephilim, giants who possessed advanced knowledge before being destroyed in a great flood. These aren't just primitive attempts to explain natural phenomena. They're too consistent, too detailed, and too widespread to dismiss as coincidence. They read like cultural memories of actual events, passed down through countless generations until the specific details were lost, but the essential truth remained. If Earth has experienced multiple resets, these myths might be humanity's collective memory of those cycles, preserved in the only way possible when all physical evidence has been erased. But perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from our own rapid development as a species. The timeline of human advancement is so compressed that it almost defies belief. For millions of years, our ancestors lived as simple hunter-gatherers, using the same basic tools and following the same survival patterns. Then suddenly, everything changed. In the space of just a few thousand years, humans developed agriculture, written language, mathematics, astronomy, metallurgy, and complex social organizations. We went from living in small tribal groups to building massive cities with sophisticated infrastructure. We invented the wheel, domesticated animals, learned to harness water and wind power, and began creating art and literature of stunning complexity. This explosive development happened simultaneously in multiple locations around the world, often in regions that had no contact with each other. The odds of such rapid advancement occurring independently in different places at roughly the same time are astronomically small. It's as if humanity suddenly gained access to knowledge that had been hidden or lost for vast periods of time. Some researchers suggest this acceleration might be explained by what they call downloaded information, knowledge that somehow survived from previous cycles and gradually became accessible to developing human consciousness. This could happen through various mechanisms that we're only beginning to understand. Genetic memory might preserve more information than we realize. Environmental factors could trigger dormant capabilities in human neural networks. Or there might be information storage systems that we haven't discovered yet, natural archives that preserve knowledge across geological timescales. The human brain itself presents puzzles that support this possibility. We use only a small percentage of our neural capacity, yet we possess cognitive abilities that seem far more sophisticated than necessary for basic survival. Our capacity for abstract thought, mathematical reasoning, and creative imagination appears to be designed for challenges much more complex than those faced by primitive hunter-gatherers. It's as if our brains were pre-adapted for civilization, already equipped with capabilities that wouldn't be needed until thousands of years after they first appeared. This could be evidence of evolutionary preparation for abilities that had been developed and lost in previous cycles, neural architecture that was already in place waiting to be reactivated when the right conditions emerged. The speed of our current technological development provides another clue. The progression from the first computers to artificial intelligence happened in less than a century. We went from the first powered flight to landing on the moon in just 66 years. The internet transformed human communication in a matter of decades. These advances happened so quickly that it's almost as if we were following a predetermined path, rediscovering technologies rather than inventing them from scratch. But our rapid development might also be a warning sign. If previous civilizations followed similar trajectories, then we might be approaching the same critical thresholds that led to their downfall. The technologies that seem like our greatest achievements might also be the tools that could trigger the next reset. Consider nuclear weapons. We developed the ability to destroy our own civilization within decades of splitting the atom. This technology emerged so quickly that we barely had time to understand its implications before it became a permanent feature of human society. If previous civilizations developed similar capabilities, they might have triggered their own destruction through warfare or accidents. Or consider artificial intelligence. We're rapidly approaching the point where we might create forms of intelligence that surpass our own. This could be the greatest achievement in human history, or it could be the mistake that leads to our replacement by something we can no longer control. Previous civilizations might have reached similar crossroads and made choices that led to their extinction. Climate modification presents another potential trigger. We're already altering Earth's atmospheric composition faster than it has changed in millions of years. Our industrial activities are shifting ocean currents, melting ice caps, and changing weather patterns in ways that could destabilize the entire planetary system. Previous civilizations might have made similar changes that triggered the very reset mechanisms we're now beginning to understand. The most disturbing possibility is that these resets aren't random disasters, but inevitable consequences of reaching certain levels of technological sophistication. Every advanced civilization might face the same fundamental challenges. Resource limitations force increasingly desperate measures. Powerful technologies create risks that eventually overwhelm safety systems. Complex societies become so interdependent that small failures cascade into total collapse. If this is true, then the resets might not be external forces acting on civilizations, but internal contradictions that destroy them from within. The same drives that push species toward intelligence and technology might also contain the seeds of their own destruction. Curiosity leads to knowledge, knowledge leads to power, and power ultimately leads to choices that no species is wise enough to make correctly. We might be witnessing this pattern in our own development. The same technologies that give us unprecedented capabilities also create unprecedented risks. Nuclear power provides clean energy, but creates waste that remains dangerous for thousands of years. Genetic engineering offers the potential to eliminate disease, but could also create organisms that threaten the entire biosphere. Artificial intelligence might solve humanity's greatest challenges or replace us entirely. Each of these technologies presents choices that could determine whether our civilization survives or becomes another layer in Earth's geological record. Previous civilizations might have faced identical decisions and chosen paths that led to their destruction. The question is whether we can learn from their mistakes without being able to study their history directly. The evidence suggests that we're rapidly approaching a critical juncture. Climate change is accelerating beyond our ability to control it. Political systems are becoming increasingly unstable as traditional power structures struggle to cope with technological change. Economic inequality is growing as automation eliminates jobs faster than new opportunities can be created. Social cohesion is breaking down as information systems become weaponized for propaganda and manipulation. These aren't just modern problems. They might be universal challenges that every technological civilization faces as it reaches maturity. Resource competition, social stratification, information warfare, and environmental degradation could be inevitable consequences of intelligence itself. If so, then survival might depend not on avoiding these challenges, but on developing wisdom to navigate them successfully. But wisdom might be exactly what gets lost in each reset cycle. Physical structures can sometimes survive geological upheavals, but knowledge and wisdom are much more fragile. They exist only in living minds and cultural institutions that can be destroyed much more easily than stone monuments. When civilizations collapse, their accumulated understanding of how to live sustainably might be the first thing to disappear. This creates a tragic cycle where each new civilization must learn the same lessons through painful trial and error. They develop the same technologies, face the same challenges, and make the same mistakes because they have no access to the wisdom of their predecessors. Each reset forces evolution to start over, not just biologically, but culturally, condemning every new form of intelligence to repeat the errors that destroyed those who came before. Breaking this cycle might require more than just technological solutions. It might demand a fundamental shift in how we think about our relationship with the planet and with each other. Instead of seeing ourselves as separate from natural systems, we might need to recognize that we're part of a larger planetary intelligence that includes all life on Earth. This perspective could change everything about how we approach the challenges facing our civilization. Instead of trying to dominate and control natural processes, we might learn to work with them. Instead of seeing other species as resources to be exploited, we might recognize them as partners in maintaining planetary stability. Instead of competing for short-term advantages, we might cooperate to ensure long-term survival. The choice we face might be the same one that has confronted every previous civilization. We can continue on our current path of explosive growth and technological development, risking the same fate that apparently befell our predecessors. Or we can choose a different direction, one that prioritizes sustainability and wisdom over power and expansion. The clock is ticking, and the signs of approaching crisis are becoming impossible to ignore. But unlike previous civilizations, we have the advantage of being able to recognize the pattern. We can see where our current trajectory is leading and still have time to change course. The question is whether we will. The answer might be hidden in the most unlikely place of all. Deep beneath our feet, in the layers of rock and sediment that record Earth's history, there may be clues we've been overlooking for decades. Not obvious artifacts or fossilized machines, but subtle chemical signatures that tell a different story about our planet's past. Every industrial civilization leaves a distinctive fingerprint in the geological record. We're creating one right now through our massive consumption of fossil fuels, our production of synthetic materials, and our alteration of natural chemical cycles. These changes don't just disappear when a civilization ends. They get locked into rock layers, preserved for millions of years like pages in a book written in molecules instead of words. Scientists have recently begun studying what they call the Anthropocene, the geological epoch defined by human impact on Earth's systems. Our industrial activities are creating chemical signatures so distinctive that future geologists will be able to identify them millions of years from now. Elevated levels of carbon dioxide, unusual isotope ratios, traces of synthetic compounds, concentrations of heavy metals that don't occur naturally. All of these markers will remain embedded in the geological record long after our cities have crumbled and our species has vanished. But here's what's truly fascinating. As researchers have begun looking for these signatures in our own time, they've started noticing similar patterns in much older rock layers. Sudden spikes in atmospheric carbon that happened millions of years before humans existed. unusual concentrations of rare earth elements in sediments that predate known volcanic activity, chemical anomalies that look suspiciously like the fingerprints of industrial activity, but in rocks that formed when the most complex life on Earth was supposed to be simple bacteria. Most of these discoveries are explained through natural processes that we don't fully understand yet. Ancient volcanic eruptions, meteorite impacts, or unknown geological phenomena could account for many of these chemical signatures. But as more anomalies are discovered, and as they begin to show patterns that mirror our own industrial impact, some researchers are quietly asking uncomfortable questions. What if some of these ancient chemical signatures aren't natural at all? What if they're the fading remnants of industrial civilizations that existed long before complex life was supposed to evolve? If Earth has been reset multiple times, then these subtle chemical traces might be the only evidence that survives of our predecessors' technological achievements. The implications are staggering. It would mean that intelligence and industry aren't recent developments in Earth's history, but recurring themes that have played out multiple times across geological timescales. Each cycle might have followed a similar pattern: the emergence of intelligence, rapid technological development, industrial expansion, environmental impact, and eventually either collapse or forced reset by planetary mechanisms. This possibility is supported by another disturbing pattern in Earth's history. The timing of major extinction events seems to follow a rough cycle of approximately years. Some 30 million researchers have noticed that these cycles coincide with our solar system's movement through different regions of the galaxy, suggesting an external trigger for planetary upheavals. But what if the trigger isn't always external? What if some of these extinction events were caused by the industrial activities of previous civilizations? The Permian extinction, which wiped out 90% of marine life, happened during a period of massive volcanic activity in Siberia. But the scale of atmospheric disruption was so enormous that it's difficult to explain through volcanism alone. What if an advanced civilization's industrial activities triggered or accelerated the volcanic eruptions, creating a runaway feedback loop that destroyed the biosphere? This scenario isn't as far-fetched as it might sound. We're already seeing how human industrial activity can influence geological processes. Fracking causes earthquakes. Deep drilling can trigger volcanic activity. Large-scale mining operations can destabilize entire mountain ranges. If a previous civilization had developed even more powerful extraction technologies, they might have inadvertently triggered the very geological catastrophes that destroyed them. The chemical evidence supports this possibility. The Permian extinction was accompanied by massive releases of carbon dioxide and methane, exactly the kind of atmospheric changes we might expect from runaway industrial processes. Ocean acidification occurred on a scale that mirrors what we're beginning to see today from our own carbon emissions. The parallels are so striking that some researchers have begun studying the Permian extinction not just as a natural disaster, but as a potential case study for what might happen if current trends continue. But the most unsettling discovery isn't in ancient rock layers at all. It's in our own DNA. Recent advances in genetic sequencing have revealed that human evolution contains puzzling discontinuities that don't fit the standard model of gradual development. Sudden leaps in brain capacity, rapid changes in neural architecture, and the appearance of cognitive for primitive abilities that seem far more sophisticated than necessary survival. These genetic anomalies suggest that human development might not have been as smooth and continuous as we've assumed. Instead, it looks like our species experienced periods of rapid advancement followed by long stretches of stability, as if we were periodically receiving infusions of new genetic information from unknown sources. Some researchers have proposed that these genetic leaps might be evidence of ancient genetic engineering. If previous civilizations had developed advanced biotechnology, they might have modified the genetic code of early human ancestors, embedding capabilities that would only become active under specific conditions or after certain developmental triggers were reached. This would explain why human brains seem over-engineered for our current needs, possessing capabilities that wouldn't be necessary until thousands of years after they first appeared. It would also explain the sudden acceleration of human development that began around 10,000 years ago, when our ancestors somehow acquired the knowledge and skills needed to develop agriculture, cities, and complex technologies in an impossibly short period of time. The genetic evidence is subtle, but consistent. Regulatory genes that control brain development show signs of having been modified relatively recently in evolutionary terms. Neural pathways that support abstract reasoning and mathematical thinking appear to have been enhanced beyond what natural selection alone would predict. Most intriguingly, humans possess genetic sequences that don't appear in any other primate species, suggesting that our lineage received genetic material from sources that current evolutionary theory can't explain. These discoveries are revolutionizing our understanding of human origins, but they also raise disturbing questions about our future. If previous civilizations were advanced enough to modify the genetic code of other species, what happened to them? Why did they disappear, leaving behind only subtle traces in our DNA and ambiguous chemical signatures in ancient rock layers? The answer might lie in the very capabilities they gave us. Enhanced intelligence and technological aptitude could be double-edged gifts. The same genetic modifications that allowed rapid civilizational development might also predispose us toward the same mistakes that destroyed our predecessors. We might be genetically programmed to follow the same trajectory of explosive growth and environmental destruction that has played out multiple times in Earth's history. This possibility is supported by disturbing patterns in human behavior that seem almost hardwired into our species. Despite clear evidence that our current path is unsustainable, we continue to consume resources at accelerating rates. Despite knowing that climate change poses existential threats, we struggle to make the changes necessary to address it. Despite understanding that nuclear weapons could destroy civilization, we continue to build more of them. These behaviors don't make rational sense from a survival perspective, but they might make perfect sense if we're following genetic programming designed for different circumstances. The drive for rapid expansion and technological development might have been advantageous for previous civilizations during their growth phases, even if it ultimately led to their destruction. We might be experiencing the same internal contradictions that doomed our predecessors. The genetic gifts that allow us to build advanced civilizations might also contain the instructions for destroying them. Intelligence without wisdom, power without restraint, and the ability to alter our environment faster than we can understand the consequences. But recognizing this pattern might also be the key to breaking it. If we understand that we're following a script written by previous civilizations, we might be able to rewrite the ending. Instead of repeating their mistakes, we could learn from their failures and choose a different path. The evidence suggests that we're rapidly approaching the same critical threshold that previous civilizations faced. Our industrial activities are beginning to trigger geological processes that could spiral beyond our control. Climate systems are approaching tipping points that might be irreversible. Technologies are developing that could either solve our greatest challenges or destroy us entirely. The choices we make in the next few decades might determine whether human civilization becomes another forgotten layer in Earth's geological record, or the first to break free from the cycle of reset and renewal. But making the right choices will require more than just technological solutions. It will demand a fundamental shift in consciousness, a recognition that we're part of a larger pattern that has repeated multiple times throughout Earth's history. We need to understand that the planet itself might be intelligent, possessing feedback mechanisms that regulate the development of life over geological timescales. These mechanisms might not be conscious in the way we understand consciousness, but they could be systematic responses to certain types of disruption. When civilizations become too disruptive to planetary stability, Earth might activate correction protocols that restore balance through what we perceive as natural disasters. From this perspective, mass extinctions aren't random catastrophes, but planetary immune responses. Just as our bodies eliminate infections that threaten our health, Earth might eliminate civilizations that threaten its long-term stability. The question is whether we can learn to live in harmony with planetary systems instead of fighting against them. This might require abandoning some of our most cherished assumptions about progress and development. Instead of seeing growth and expansion as inherently good, we might need to embrace stability and sustainability. Instead of trying to dominate natural processes, we might need to learn to work with them. Instead of viewing ourselves as separate from the planetary system, we might need to recognize that we're part of it. The transformation won't be easy. Our entire economic system is based on continuous growth. Our political structures assume competition for limited resources. Our cultural values celebrate individual achievement over collective survival. Changing these fundamental assumptions will require nothing less than a revolution in human consciousness. But the alternative might be the same fate that apparently befell every civilization that came before us. The previous record suggests that geological attempts at intelligence have all ended the same way, with chemical signatures of industrial activity, followed by sudden extinction and eventual erasure from the rock record. The pattern is clear, but the outcome isn't predetermined. We still have time to make different choices, to write a different ending to the story that has repeated so many times in Earth's history. The question is whether we possess the wisdom to recognize the pattern and the courage to break free from it. The clock is ticking, and the signs are becoming impossible to ignore. But for the first time in Earth's history, a civilization has the opportunity to understand what's happening and potentially change course before it's too late. Whether we seize that opportunity or repeat the mistakes of our forgotten predecessors will determine not just the fate of human civilization, but the future of intelligence itself on this ancient and mysterious planet we call home. The question of whether we're alone in this cycle becomes even more haunting when we consider the possibility that we might not be. What if there are survivors from previous resets, remnants of ancient civilizations that somehow managed to escape the planetary clearing mechanisms that destroyed their contemporaries? What if they're still here, hidden in plain sight, watching as we repeat the same patterns that led to their own near extinction? This isn't as impossible as it might sound. Throughout human history, there have been persistent reports of encounters with beings that don't fit our understanding of natural evolution. Ancient texts describe interactions with entities possessing advanced knowledge and capabilities far beyond what early humans should have possessed. These accounts appear in every culture, separated by thousands of miles and years, yet they share remarkably consistent details about the appearance, behavior, and technology of these mysterious visitors. Traditional archaeology dismisses these stories as mythology or misunderstood natural phenomena. But what if they're actually historical records of contact with the survivors of previous civilizations? Beings who managed to escape the resets by going underground, developing technologies that allowed them to survive in hidden enclaves while the surface world was scoured clean and rebuilt from scratch. The idea gains credibility when we consider how such survivors might have evolved over millions of years of isolation. Cut off from the surface world, forced to adapt to completely different environments, they would have followed evolutionary paths radically different from surface life. They might have developed technologies based on principles we haven't discovered, using energy sources we can't detect, building with materials we don't recognize. More importantly, they would have learned the lessons that surface civilizations keep failing to learn. Having witnessed multiple resets, having survived the destruction of their own original civilization, they would understand the patterns and cycles that govern planetary development. They would know which technologies are sustainable and which lead to destruction. They would have developed wisdom that we're only beginning to glimpse, but this wisdom would come with a terrible burden. Imagine watching civilization after civilization rise from the ashes, make the same mistakes, and destroy themselves in the same ways. Imagine having the knowledge to prevent these disasters, but being unable to intervene without risking your own survival. The psychological weight of such experiences would be almost unbearable. Perhaps this explains the cryptic nature of the encounters described in ancient texts. If survivors exist, they might be operating under strict protocols designed to minimize their impact on surface civilizations. Direct intervention could alter the natural development process in ways that ultimately prove more harmful than helpful. So they watch, document, and occasionally provide subtle guidance to those who seem ready to receive it. The evidence for this possibility is scattered throughout human history in ways that are easy to dismiss individually, but form compelling patterns when viewed collectively. Sudden leaps in human knowledge that can't be explained by gradual development. The appearance of advanced mathematical concepts in cultures that supposedly lacked the foundational knowledge to develop them. Architectural techniques that seem to require tools and understanding that didn't officially exist at the time. Consider the mystery of human language itself. Linguistic evolution should be gradual, with new capabilities emerging slowly over thousands of years. Instead, complex language appears to have developed almost instantaneously in evolutionary terms, complete with sophisticated grammar, abstract concepts, and symbolic thinking. It's as if humans suddenly gained access to linguistic frameworks that had been developed elsewhere and were somehow transmitted to developing consciousness. The same pattern appears in agriculture, mathematics, astronomy, and metallurgy. Each of these foundational technologies emerged simultaneously in multiple locations around the world, often in cultures that had no contact with each other. The statistical probability of such parallel development occurring naturally is vanishingly small. It suggests some form of external influence source or share of the most knowledge. But perhaps the most intriguing evidence comes from our own technological progression. The development of human technology follows patterns that seem almost too precise to be accidental. Each discovery builds seamlessly upon the last, as if we're following a predetermined roadmap rather than venturing into truly unknown territory. This becomes especially apparent in our current digital age. The development of computers, networks, and artificial intelligence is proceeding along trajectories that seem to have been anticipated decades before the technology existed. Early science fiction writers describe technologies with remarkable accuracy, as if they had access to blueprints for our current systems. What if they did? What if survivors from previous civilizations have been subtly guiding our development, providing inspiration and insights to key individuals at crucial moments in history? This wouldn't require direct contact or obvious intervention. It could be accomplished through much more subtle means that we're only beginning to understand. Recent discoveries in quantum physics suggest that consciousness might not be as localized as we've assumed. Quantum entanglement demonstrates that particles can share information instantaneously across vast distances. Some researchers have proposed that consciousness itself might operate through quantum mechanisms that allow information transfer between minds without direct physical contact. If this is true, then survivors from previous civilizations might be able to influence human development through quantum consciousness networks. They could plant ideas, provide inspiration, and guide discovery without ever revealing their existence. From our perspective, these insights would seem to come from within, the products of human genius and creativity. But they might actually be carefully orchestrated gifts from beings who understand the dangers and opportunities that lie ahead. This possibility becomes even more intriguing when we consider the timing of major technological breakthroughs. Many of our most important discoveries have occurred during periods of crisis, when humanity needed new capabilities to address existential challenges. The development of agriculture coincided with climate changes that made hunting and gathering less viable. The Industrial Revolution emerged during a period of population growth that required new methods of production and organization. Our current digital revolution is happening just as we face challenges that might require global coordination and unprecedented levels of information processing to solve. Climate change, resource depletion, and social instability all demand responses that would be impossible without the communication and computational tools we've recently developed. The timing seems too convenient to be coincidental. It suggests that our technological development might be carefully orchestrated to provide us with the tools we need exactly when we need them most. But this raises disturbing questions about our autonomy and the true nature of human progress. Are we truly the authors of our own civilization, or merely following a script written by others? Have our greatest achievements been the result of our own ingenuity, or gifts from beings who understand our situation better than we do? And if we are being guided, what does that say about our ultimate destiny? The answers might depend on whether we can prove ourselves worthy of the assistance we might be receiving. Previous civilizations apparently failed this test, despite having access to similar guidance. They developed powerful technologies, but lacked the wisdom to use them responsibly. They created impressive monuments and sophisticated systems, but ultimately destroyed themselves through conflicts, environmental degradation, or technological disasters. We might be facing the same examination that our predecessors failed. The survivors, if they exist, might be watching to see whether we can break the cycle that is repeated so many times throughout Earth's history. They might be providing us with the tools we need to succeed, but the choice of how to use those tools remains entirely our own. This perspective reframes many of our current challenges in a different light. Climate change might not just be an environmental crisis, but a test of our ability to cooperate on a planetary scale. Nuclear weapons might not just be tools of destruction, but measures of our wisdom and restraint. Artificial intelligence might not just be a technological achievement, but a reflection of our understanding of consciousness and responsibility. Each of these challenges requires us to transcend the limitations that destroyed previous civilizations. We need to think beyond national boundaries and immediate interests. We need to balance power with restraint, ambition with wisdom, progress with sustainability. We need to prove that intelligence can evolve beyond the self-destructive patterns that have characterized its previous expressions on this planet. But we're running out of time to demonstrate these capabilities. The signs of approaching crisis are accelerating beyond our ability to address them through traditional means. Climate systems are destabilizing faster than our political systems can respond. Social inequalities are growing faster than our economic systems can accommodate. Technological risks are emerging faster than our regulatory systems can evaluate them. The convergence of these crises might not be accidental. If survivors exist and are monitoring our progress, they would recognize the signs of approaching planetary correction mechanisms. They might understand that we're entering the same critical phase that destroyed their own original civilization and countless others throughout Earth's history. The question is whether they would intervene to prevent another reset or allow it to proceed if we prove incapable of managing our own development. Their decision might depend on whether they believe we have the potential to break the cycle or are destined to repeat the same mistakes that have characterized every previous attempt at planetary intelligence. From their perspective, intervention might actually be counterproductive. Each civilization needs to earn its survival through its own choices and actions. External assistance might prevent the development of the wisdom and capabilities necessary for long-term stability. The harsh lesson of planetary reset might be necessary for the evolution of truly sustainable forms of intelligence. But there might be another possibility. What if the survivors aren't just watching passively, but are preparing for a different kind of intervention? What if they're waiting for us to reach a certain level of development before revealing themselves and offering direct assistance? What if the ultimate test isn't whether we can solve our problems alone, but whether we can recognize when we need help and accept it gracefully? This scenario would explain many of the anomalies in our recent history. The acceleration of technological development, the emergence of global communication systems, and the growing awareness of planetary interconnectedness might all be preparation for a moment of contact that could transform human civilization. But such contact would bring its own risks. The revelation that we're not alone, that our planet has hosted intelligence before, and that we're being observed by survivors of previous civilizations would shatter many of our fundamental assumptions about reality. Some humans might welcome such contact, but others might respond with fear, hostility, or denial. The psychological impact could be devastating enough to trigger the very collapse that intervention was meant to prevent. The knowledge that we're not the first, not unique, and not necessarily destined for survival could undermine the confidence and unity necessary for addressing our current challenges. Perhaps this is why contact, if it occurs, would need to be gradual and carefully managed. The survivors would need to reveal themselves slowly, allowing human consciousness to adapt to new realities without being overwhelmed. They would need to provide guidance without undermining human agency, assistance without creating dependence. The process might already be underway. The growing interest in ancient mysteries, the increasing acceptance of unconventional possibilities, and the emergence of new paradigms in physics and consciousness research might all be preparing humanity for revelations that would have been impossible to accept in previous generations. We might be witnessing the early stages of a controlled disclosure process designed to prepare us for contact with the survivors of Earth's previous civilizations. If so, our response to these preparations will determine whether we're ready for the next phase of planetary development. or destined for the same fate that befell our predecessors. The choice, as always, remains ours, but we might not have to make it alone. The implications of this possibility extend far beyond just the question of whether we're alone. If survivors from previous civilizations exist and are monitoring our development, then every decision we make is being evaluated against the failures of those who came before us. We're not just facing our own challenges, but participating in a test that has been administered multiple times throughout Earth's history. This realization should be both humbling and empowering. Humbling because it suggests that our achievements might not be as original as we believe, that our struggles are part of patterns that have repeated across geological time. But empowering because it means that success is possible, that intelligence can survive and evolve beyond the self-destructive tendencies that have characterized its previous expressions. The survivors, if they exist, represent proof that the cycle can be broken. They demonstrate that wisdom can triumph over ambition, that sustainability can be achieved even by species that developed powerful technologies. Their existence would mean that the resets aren't inevitable consequences of intelligence, but failures of specific civilizations to manage their own development responsibly. But their survival might have come at a tremendous cost, withdrawing from the surface world, abandoning the open skies and vast landscapes that most life forms consider natural habitat, accepting isolation from the mainstream of planetary development. The price of survival might have been the sacrifice of everything that makes existence meaningful for most conscious beings. This raises profound questions about what survival really means. Is it better to live briefly in the open light, experiencing the full range of possibilities that existence offers, or to endure indefinitely in hidden refuges, preserving consciousness but limiting its expression? Is a civilization that survives by abandoning its original nature still the same civilization? Or has it become something else entirely? These questions become more than philosophical when we consider our own options. As our current civilization approaches what might be another reset threshold, we face similar choices. Do we continue on our current path, accepting the risks of planetary correction mechanisms in exchange for the freedom to develop according to our own nature? Or do we begin preparing survival strategies that might preserve human consciousness beyond whatever disasters lie ahead? The answers might depend on what we discover about the true nature of the reset cycles themselves. If they're random disasters triggered by external forces, then survival might be largely a matter of luck and preparation. But if they're systematic responses by planetary intelligence to civilizations that become too disruptive, then survival might require fundamental changes in how we relate to Earth's natural systems. The evidence increasingly suggests the latter possibility. The timing and nature of major extinction events show patterns that are difficult to explain through random external causes alone. The planet appears to have sophisticated feedback mechanisms that maintain long-term stability by eliminating sources of disruption when they become too severe. From this perspective, the survivors wouldn't just be refugees from disasters, but graduates of a planetary education system. They would have learned to live in harmony with Earth's natural cycles instead of fighting against them. Their technologies would be designed to enhance rather than disrupt planetary stability. Their social systems would prioritize long-term sustainability over short-term growth. But this education comes with a curriculum written in catastrophe. Each lesson is taught through the destruction of civilizations that fail to learn in time. The survivors are those who manage to grasp the essential principles before their final exams, while the rest become cautionary tales preserved only in geological layers. We might currently be enrolled in the same course that destroyed our predecessors. The signs are all around us if we know how to read them. rising temperatures, shifting weather patterns, declining biodiversity, resource depletion, social instability. These aren't just problems to be solved, but symptoms of deeper misalignment between our civilization and the planetary systems that sustain it. The question is whether we can learn the necessary lessons in time to avoid the fate of previous students. The survivors, if they exist, might be able to provide guidance, but they cannot take the test for us. Each civilization must demonstrate its own understanding through its own choices and actions. The next phase of this planetary examination might be beginning now. The challenges we face in the coming decades will test everything we think we know about cooperation, wisdom, and survival. Our responses will determine whether human civilization joins the ranks of successful graduates or becomes another layer in Earth's geological record of failed experiments. But there's one more possibility we haven't considered. What if the entire cycle is designed not just to test civilizations, but to create them? What if the resets aren't punishments for failure, but necessary stages in a larger developmental process? What if Earth itself is evolving, using intelligence as a tool for its own growth and transformation? From this perspective, each civilization would be an experiment in planetary consciousness. The survivors would be successful prototypes, preserved not just for their own sake, but as resources for future iterations. The failures would be learning experiences, providing data about which approaches work and which lead to destruction. The ultimate goal might not be the survival of any particular species, but the evolution of truly sustainable planetary intelligence. A form of consciousness that integrates all life forms into a single, stable, self-regulating system. Each reset would clear away failed attempts and make room for new experiments, gradually refining the process until true planetary awakening becomes possible. If this is true, then our current civilization might be just one more experiment in this vast developmental process. Our success or failure would matter not just to us, but to the planet itself, contributing to a form of evolution that operates on timescales far beyond individual species or even geological epochs. The survivors would be both products and guardians of this process, maintaining continuity between cycles while allowing each new civilization the freedom to explore its own possibilities. They would understand that their role isn't to prevent resets, but to ensure that each one contributes to the larger pattern of planetary development. This possibility transforms everything about how we might understand our situation. We wouldn't just be struggling for our own survival, but participating in something much larger and more significant. Our choices would matter, not just for human civilization, but for the future of consciousness itself on Earth. The responsibility is overwhelming, but so is the opportunity. We might be part of the generation that finally achieves true planetary intelligence, breaking the cycle of reset and renewal that has characterized Earth's development for billions of years. Or we might be another failed experiment, contributing our own lessons to the vast library of experience that guides future attempts. Either way, we're part of a story much larger and older than we ever imagined, and that story is still being written, with each choice we make adding new chapters to Earth's long journey toward awakening. The most chilling aspect of this possibility isn't what it means for our future, but what it reveals about our present. Every technological breakthrough we celebrate, every scientific discovery we herald as uniquely human, every moment of progress we point to as evidence of our exceptional nature might actually be predetermined steps in a cosmic curriculum we don't even realize we're following. Think about the trajectory of human development over just the past century. We went from the first powered flight to walking on the moon in 66 years. We developed computers that evolved from room-sized machines to devices more powerful than anything imaginable just decades ago. We unlocked the secrets of DNA, split the atom, and created global communication networks that connect every corner of the planet in real time. The speed of this advancement is so rapid that it defies logical explanation through gradual discovery alone. It's as if we've been following a blueprint, checking off achievements in a predetermined sequence that leads somewhere specific. But where exactly are we being led, and who or what is guiding the process? The answer might lie in understanding that Earth itself could be conscious in ways we're only beginning to comprehend. Not conscious like a human mind, but conscious like a vast, interconnected system that processes information, responds to stimuli, and evolves over geological timescales. From this perspective, individual civilizations aren't separate entities competing for resources, but organs in a planetary body that's slowly becoming aware of itself. Each reset cycle might represent a kind of cellular renewal, where outdated or dysfunctional components are cleared away to make room for more advanced replacements. The civilizations that survive aren't just lucky or clever. They're the ones that have learned to function as healthy parts of the larger organism rather than parasites that consume more than they contribute. This biological analogy becomes even more compelling when we consider how Earth regulates its own systems. Global temperature remains within narrow bands despite dramatic changes in solar output and atmospheric composition. Ocean chemistry stays remarkably stable despite constant inputs of minerals and pollutants. Oxygen levels fluctuate but never stray far from the range that supports complex life. These regulatory mechanisms suggest a level of systemic intelligence that operates far beyond what we typically associate with consciousness. Earth appears to actively maintain conditions suitable for life, adjusting and correcting imbalances before they become catastrophic. But what happens when one component of the system becomes so disruptive that local corrections are no longer sufficient? The answer might be the reset mechanisms we've been discussing. Mass extinctions, climate shifts, and geological upheavals could be Earth's equivalent of immune responses, eliminating threats to overall system stability. From a planetary perspective, the destruction of disruptive civilizations wouldn't be tragic, but necessary, like a body fighting off an infection. But here's where the analogy becomes truly fascinating. In biological systems, immune responses aren't just destructive, they're also educational. The immune system learns from each encounter, developing more sophisticated responses to future threats. It preserves memory of past infections and uses that information to mount faster, more effective defenses when similar challenges arise. What if Earth's reset mechanisms work the same way? What if each cycle doesn't just clear away failed civilizations, but also incorporates lessons from their successes and failures into the planetary memory system? The survivors we've speculated about might not just be refugees from disasters, but living repositories of accumulated planetary wisdom. This would explain why human development has accelerated so dramatically in recent centuries. We might be benefiting from billions of years of accumulated experience, accessing insights that were hard-won by countless previous civilizations. Our rapid technological advancement wouldn't be unprecedented human genius, but the natural result of having access to a vast library of planetary knowledge. But this library comes with a warning system. As we approach the same critical thresholds that destroyed our predecessors, we're beginning to experience the same corrective pressures that triggered previous resets. Climate instability, resource depletion, social fragmentation, and technological risks aren't just modern problems, but recurring symptoms that appear whenever a civilization reaches a certain level of planetary disruption. The question is whether we can recognize these warning signs for what they are and respond appropriately before the correction mechanisms activate. Previous civilizations apparently failed this test, becoming so focused on short-term survival and competition that they ignored the larger patterns until it was too late. We have advantages they might not have possessed. Global communication systems allow us to share information and coordinate responses on a planetary scale. Scientific instruments give us unprecedented ability to monitor Earth's systems and detect early warning signs of instability. Most importantly, we're beginning to understand that we're part of larger cycles rather than separate from them. But we also face unique challenges. Our technological capabilities have grown so powerful that we can now influence planetary systems directly, potentially triggering catastrophic feedback loops faster than natural correction mechanisms can respond. Nuclear weapons give us the ability to destroy complex life entirely. Climate engineering technologies could destabilize weather systems beyond recovery. Artificial intelligence might develop beyond our ability to control or understand. Each of these capabilities represents both tremendous opportunity and existential risk. Used wisely, they could help us transition to truly sustainable forms of civilization that work in harmony with planetary systems. Used foolishly, they could trigger the most complete reset in Earth's history, potentially ending the entire experiment in planetary consciousness. The choice we face might be the most important decision any civilization has ever confronted. We can continue following the same patterns that led to previous resets, trusting that our technology and intelligence will somehow allow us to transcend natural limits that constrained our predecessors. Or we can recognize that we're part of something much larger than ourselves and begin learning to function as conscious participants in planetary evolution. The second path requires abandoning many assumptions that have driven human development for millennia. The belief that growth is always good, that competition is more important than cooperation, that humans are separate from and superior to natural systems. It means recognizing that true progress might involve learning restraint rather than developing ever more powerful capabilities. This transformation wouldn't be easy or comfortable. Our entire economic system is based on continuous expansion. Our political structures assume competition for limited resources. Our cultural values celebrate individual achievement over collective well-being. Changing these fundamental orientations would require nothing less than a revolution in human consciousness. But the alternative might be the same fate that apparently befell every previous attempt at planetary intelligence. The geological record suggests that this choice has been made many times before, and each time the result has been the same. Short-term thinking and narrow self-interest have triumphed over long-term sustainability and planetary awareness. We might be the first civilization to understand what's at stake, the first to recognize that we're not just struggling for our own survival, but participating in a process of planetary awakening that has been unfolding for billions of years. The first to realize that our choices will determine not just the future of human civilization, but the future of consciousness itself on Earth. The responsibility is almost overwhelming, but so is the opportunity. We could be the generation that finally breaks the cycle of reset and renewal, that learns to live as conscious participants in planetary evolution, rather than unconscious threats to planetary stability. We could be the ones who help Earth complete its long journey toward full awakening. Or we could become another layer in the geological record, another cautionary tale preserved in rock for whatever form of intelligence eventually succeeds where we failed. Another experiment that contributed its lessons to the vast process of planetary learning, but couldn't quite manage the transition from destructive to constructive participation in Earth's evolution. The signs suggest we're rapidly approaching the moment when this choice can no longer be delayed. The correction mechanisms are already activating. The feedback loops are beginning to accelerate, and the window for voluntary transformation is closing. Whatever we decide, we need to decide soon. Because Earth is patient, but it's not infinitely patient. And the lessons of history suggest that when civilizations wait too long to make the necessary changes, the planet itself makes those changes for them. The question isn't whether change is coming. The question is whether we'll be part of it or victims of it. So here we stand, at what might be the most critical moment in the history of consciousness on Earth. Everything we've explored together in this journey points to a single, inescapable truth. We are not the beginning of intelligence on this planet. We are not the first to ask these questions, to build civilizations, to reach for something greater than survival. We are simply the latest chapter in a story that stretches back through deep time, written in languages of stone and chemistry, that we're only now learning to read. The evidence surrounds us like pieces of a vast puzzle scattered across billions of years. The chemical signatures in ancient rocks that mirror our own industrial fingerprint. The genetic modifications embedded in our DNA that speak of interventions we can't explain. The impossible precision of megalithic structures that shouldn't exist according to our timeline of development. The myths and legends that echo across every culture, telling the same story of rise and fall, creation and destruction, wisdom gained and lost. Each piece by itself might be dismissed as coincidence, misinterpretation, or natural phenomenon. But when you step back and see the pattern they form together, the picture becomes undeniable. Earth has been through this cycle before, not just once, but potentially countless times. Intelligence emerges, civilizations rise, technology develops, and then something happens. A reset, a clearing of the slate, a return to the beginning so the whole process can start over again. The mechanisms are all around us, built into the very fabric of our planet's systems. Magnetic field reversals that expose the surface to deadly radiation. Supervolcanic eruptions that can plunge the world into years of darkness. Asteroid impacts that can shatter entire ecosystems. Plate tectonics that literally consume continents, grinding the past into molten rock and erasing it from existence. These aren't just random disasters. They're part of Earth's operating system, natural correction protocols that activate when the planetary balance becomes too disrupted. And we are disrupting that balance now, faster and more dramatically than any civilization before us. Our carbon emissions are altering atmospheric chemistry at a rate that geological history suggests is unsustainable. Our consumption of resources is approaching levels that no planetary system can support indefinitely. Our technologies are developing capabilities that could either solve our greatest challenges or destroy us completely, and we're racing toward those capabilities faster than we're developing the wisdom to use them safely. The warning signs are accelerating beyond our ability to ignore them. Climate systems destabilizing, social structures fragmenting, economic inequalities growing, political institutions failing to cope with the pace of technological change. These aren't just modern problems. They might be universal symptoms that appear whenever a civilization reaches the same critical threshold we're approaching now. But here's what makes our situation different from all those who came before us. We can see the pattern. We understand what's happening. We know that we're not alone in facing these challenges, that other forms of intelligence have walked this path before us. And most importantly, we know that some of them survived. The survivors, hidden though they may be, represent proof that the cycle can be broken. They demonstrate that consciousness can evolve beyond the self-destructive patterns that have characterized its previous expressions on this planet. Their existence, if they exist, means that we don't have to repeat the same mistakes that destroyed our predecessors. We can learn from their experience, even if we can't access their history directly. We can choose a different path, one that leads not to reset, but to genuine sustainability, not to domination over natural systems, but to integration with them, not to the expansion of human power, but to the evolution of planetary consciousness. The choice is ours, but the time to make it is running out. Every day we delay, the correction mechanisms grow stronger. Every month we continue on our current trajectory, the probability of voluntary transformation decreases. Every year that passes without fundamental change brings us closer to the same threshold that has triggered resets throughout Earth's history. Yet even as the warnings multiply, there's reason for hope. Our global communication networks give us unprecedented ability to coordinate planetary responses to planetary challenges. Our scientific instruments allow us to monitor Earth's systems in real time and detect problems before they become catastrophic. Our understanding of biology, chemistry, and physics provides tools our predecessors never possessed for living in harmony with natural processes. Most importantly, we're beginning to understand that we're not separate from the planet, but part of it. That human civilization isn't something imposed on Earth, but something emerging from it. That our technologies don't have to be weapons against nature, but can be expressions of natural creativity. That our intelligence doesn't have to be a threat to planetary stability, but can be its greatest protector. This understanding changes everything about how we might approach the challenges ahead. Instead of seeing climate change as a problem to be solved through dominance and control, we can see it as feedback from a planetary system that we've disrupted and need to heal. Instead of viewing other species as resources to be exploited, we can recognize them as partners in maintaining the conditions that sustain all life. Instead of competing for short-term advantages, we can cooperate to ensure long-term survival. The transformation won't be easy. It will require abandoning assumptions that have driven human development for thousands of years. It will demand new forms of economic organization, new political structures, new ways of relating to each other and to the natural world. It will challenge everything we think we know about progress, success, and what it means to be human. But the alternative is to become another forgotten layer in Earth's geological record. Another experiment that contributed its lessons to the vast library of planetary experience but couldn't quite make the transition from destructive to constructive participation in Earth's evolution. Another civilization that had all the pieces of the puzzle but couldn't put them together in time. We don't have to accept that fate. We can choose to be the first civilization to break free from the cycle of reset and renewal that has shaped our planet's development for billions of years. We can choose to be the generation that finally achieves genuine partnership between human intelligence and planetary wisdom. We can choose to write a different ending to the story that has been told so many times before. The clock is ticking, but it hasn't run out yet. The correction mechanisms are activating, but they haven't reached the point of no return. The window for voluntary transformation is closing, but it's still open. We still have time to choose consciousness over unconsciousness, cooperation over competition, wisdom over cleverness, sustainability over growth. But we need to choose now. Not tomorrow, not next year, not after the next election or the next technological breakthrough. Now. Because the patterns of history suggest that civilizations that wait for perfect conditions or complete understanding never get the chance to implement the changes they finally recognize as necessary. The Earth is patient, but it's not infinitely patient. And patience, even planetary patience, has its limits. When those limits are reached, the choice is no longer ours to make. The planet makes it for us in ways that civilizations rarely survive. So this is our moment. This is our test. This is our opportunity to prove that intelligence can evolve beyond the patterns that have destroyed it so many times before. To demonstrate that consciousness can become a force for healing rather than disruption, for integration rather than domination, for life rather than death. The survivors, if they exist, are watching. The planet itself is responding. The future of intelligence on Earth hangs in the balance, and the choice, for perhaps the final time in this cosmic cycle, is entirely ours. What will we choose? The answer to that question will determine whether our children inherit a world of wonder and possibility, or whether some future intelligence, rising from whatever remains after the next reset, will puzzle over the strange chemical signatures we've left behind in the rocks, wondering who we were and why we disappeared, just as we now wonder about those who came before us. The cycle can continue, or it can end. The pattern can repeat, or it can break. The story can reset, or it can finally, truly begin. The choice is ours. The time is now. And the future of everything we've ever loved hangs in the balance of what we decide to do next.